Well, good day, my friends. It's your old pal, Jordan the Lion. How are you all doing today? I hope you said great. Today we are in Glenwood City, Colorado, and we're here to pay our respects to someone who was a victim of the Manson family murders. Now, this is not the 7 that everybody always talks about, the Tate LaBiancas. This was actually before, and we're going to tell you Gary Hinman's story today. Daze with Jordan the Lion and you all begins right now. Hey there, buddy. I think I misspoke. It's actually Glenwood Springs. Are you awake today? How you doing, buddy? Here we are at Rosebud Cemetery. Very nice cemetery. Gary was actually raised out this way, Fort Collins, Colorado. He was one of 3 children. In 1959, after he graduated high school, he got married and they moved out to California and ended up going to the University of California. And there, Gary studied music, became a Buddhist, could play many instruments. He could play piano, which was his favorite, drums, bagpipes, guitar, and Gary was actually teaching music out of his home in Topanga Canyon. And then he met some of the family of the Manson followers. Gary Hinman was known as being a very giving and helpful person. People loved him, and with this musical ability and teaching, they just kind of went hand in hand. He would be good with people and helping them learn. He was also a devout Buddhist, and when he ended up coming into contact with the Manson family, it was actually through Mary Bruner, it said. She ended up having a baby with Charles Manson. She was friends with Gary, and when she ended up having her baby, she didn't really have the money to take care of the baby, and so said that Gary would help take care of the baby with money for diapers and clothing and food and things like that it would need. So he was known to be a very helpful person. But it was also said once he was murdered that they believed that he was involved in selling drugs, and that was where his connection with the Manson family led up to his death. Here's the grave of Gary Allen Hinman. 1934 to 1969, not a very long life at all. He was actually supposed to take a job. He was supposed to go take a trip to Japan and was to accept a new job until he was murdered. Now, he was said to have been selling drugs, and he would do it through a man named Bobby Beausoleil. And so it was said that Bobby Beausoleil thought that Gary Hinman had some sort of inheritance of like $20,000 or $30,000. Now, at the same time, Charles Manson had started this cult commune family, and the rules to the commune were anybody that joined, basically everything you had became part of the commune. And so when they heard that Gary had this money, the initial thought was, let's go force him to be part of our group, become part of the family. Now, in addition to thinking they could get money if they got him to join, there was also supposedly a bad drug deal that went down, that Bobby Beausoleil had sold drugs that came from Gary Hinman to some bikers, like a biker gang, and they said that the drugs were no good and they wanted their money back. Bobby Beausoleil didn't have the money, and Gary Hinman said, I've already spent the money, I don't have the money either. So Charles Manson sent Bobby Beausoleil, Mary, and Susan Atkins over to Gary Hinman's house, and their job was basically trying to muscle some money out of him. So that's what they did. They tried to convince him to join their group. That wasn't working. Tried to get money out of him. That wasn't working. He was very hospitable, let people come stay at his house all the time. He was very friendly and everything like that. So, this wouldn't have been uncommon for him to welcome people in his house, but this ended up going on for days because And the time they were there, Bobby Beausoleil kind of freaked out and called Charles Manson and said, hey, Gary's not giving in. He's not giving us any money. He says he doesn't have any money. So Charles Manson comes over with a samurai sword and he tries to get some money out of him as well, and then sends a little warning by making a big slice right up the side of Gary Hinman's face. It was said that it cut open part of his face and his ear. Charles Manson then left for those three to deal with this on their own. Now, eventually, Gary continued to want to go to the hospital and continued to pressure them to take him to the hospital, give him a ride to the hospital. And they didn't want to do it because Bobby Beausoleil assumed that he would end up in jail if they found out what happened. And so instead, they decided to murder Gary Hinman in his house. Bobby Beausoleil took a knife, stabbed him twice, and then they all took pillows and suffocated Gary Hinman. It was actually said that Susan Atkins was the one who finally was the one pressing down when he finally stopped moving. But it was also said that while they were doing this, Gary was doing his Buddhist chant for peace. Now, after this heinous crime had been completed, they decided to take some of his blood and write on the wall, "Political Piggy," and put a paw print, hoping to lead investigators that someday would find this to thinking that the Black Panthers had done this. So it was only $20 that the group left Gary Hinman's house with. They thought they were coming to walk home with $20,000 to $30,000. They ended up with $20, which they spent on snacks. Gary Hinman wasn't found for another couple of days. Eventually, when people hadn't heard from Gary, they went up to his house, and it was said that even from the outside, you could smell what had happened inside. And so they called the sheriff, and they came and they found Gary laying there with a tarp over him in a very bad state. This had been several days. The coroner report said that his body had marbleized, that it had insect infestations, that had this massive gash across his face that the girls had tried to, at one point, sew up with dental floss. So a few days after that, a week after that, Bobby Beausoleil was found in Gary Hinman's car with the murder weapon still bloody, hidden in the wheel well. Now, a short time later, the Manson family would do the most famous of their killing spree, which was the La Bianca house, and then Sharon Tate, Jay Sebring, everybody up on Cielo Drive. But when they did that, they also wrote pigs and things like that on the walls. And it was kind of thought at the time that they had done these acts to take away from the Gary Hinman, hoping that with the police having Bobby Beausoleil in custody and these still happening, that they would see that they had the wrong guy. As we know, this was a terrifying time in Los Angeles history. People were scared to go outside. They still talk about it to this day. People are still completely obsessed with this story and wanting to know what happened and all the details and all the connections and all the things that honestly we'll probably never ever know. But the family was eventually tried, and Bobby Beausoleil was tried for Gary Hinman's death and was sentenced to death. But as we know, the California system changed their laws, got rid of the death penalty. So he ended up and is, I believe, still in the prison system because he went up for parole eventually after many, many years, and they granted him parole. However, the governor of California shot it down and vetoed it. I don't think we'll really ever know what the full story with Gary Hinman and all of the Manson family really was. You know, he was friends and tied up with them and things like that, but talk about making the wrong friends. I mean, this poor guy at 35 years of age had his whole life ahead of him, had things planned, had a whole future going, and it was all ended. And Bobby Beausoleil gets to continue to live out his days in prison. He's made albums, he's made music for soundtracks, he's done so many things. He's been married. I mean, he's really lived out a nice life for himself in prison, while Gary Hinman lost his life and is buried here next to his mother, who actually passed a year after Gary. There's his mother, Frances Hinman, right next to her son. So he's the less talked about, I think, of the Manson family murders, but he was also the earliest of them. So Gary Hinman's a name not to be forgotten. Well, my friends, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this vlog, and rest in peace, Gary Hinman. Let this be a lesson to everyone. Be careful who you let into your life. You never know what they're capable of. Be very careful. We'll see you next time. From Glenwood Springs, Colorado. Goodbye.